Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on lifting service quality and guest experience, where we are joined by Pizza Hut and Forup Sommerland. About myself, my name is Rasmus Andreasen. Some of you may know me already, but otherwise to those of you who don't, I'm the head of customer success here at Mobaro for Park and Attractions. I've been with Mobaro for a little over 5 years now. And during that time, I've helped prepare and implement the system in many parks all over the world. Basically, I'm part of our support team as well, and I serve as the main contact for our park and attractions. Today's agenda, first I'll just be introducing myself, and then we'll go into a quick introduction to Mobaro, and then followed by the main event, the panel discussion with Pizza Hut and Forup Sommerland, where we'll be talking about some of these topics that you can see on screen right now. Yeah. So first, as I said, just a quick introduction to Mobaro. I'd just like to take 2 minutes to run through this quickly so you have an idea about who we are. Of course, some of you might already know who we are and what Mobaro does. Some of you might even be using the system or have colleagues using the system already, but I'm sure that there's also some of you who don't know what we do, or at least everything we do. Not that I'm going to cover everything right now, but I'm going to cover it in a F&B context. So the main building blocks of Mobaro in this context is that so we have digital checklists, we have task management that you can do. This can also be triggered from checklists. We have a library function where users can gain access to the files that you deem relevant to them while they're out and about in the park. You can get the system to show if you are ready to open or not in your various locations. Of course, we also have some reporting built in, so we'll have an archive of completed checklists and assignments that you can review at any time. And then we also have dashboards that you can set up, and they can give you different kinds of information and much more. Just to give you a few specific examples, here I have a checklist on screen. Let's say it's an opening checklist for a restaurant that I, as maybe a supervisor in a restaurant, I'm supposed to do this on a daily basis before we open. It can be sectioned however you want, and in this case it's questions about the outside area where I have ensured that the trash cans have been equipped with trash bags and so on. I've also put up the parasols and wiped down the benches and so on. But during this latter procedure, I've noticed that one of the parasols needs to be replaced or repaired due to some damage, maybe overnight. So I'm documenting this from the exact question in the checklist, and I'm sending it to my F&B manager, who can then take action on this. And then, of course, I continue with the rest of the checklist and finish that. Then, as you complete the checklists, you can have this sort of operational overview in what we call the location overview. So here we can see that my Burger Palace, which is where I completed the checklist from, and the ice cream kiosk, they are ready to open, but the gourmet restaurant and pizza restaurant are still not quite there yet. So this would be where you would maybe look 30 minutes before you open your park, and then you can follow up on, if there were restaurants that you expected to be ready at this time, and you can see that they're not, then you can follow up on and make sure that they get ready on time. And then here we have a dashboard example that I have prepared. We have this readiness widget right here, which is comparable to the location overview. It's just summed up at a higher level. So we can see that we are 50% done. 2 of the 4 necessary checklists have been completed. I also have an overview of open assignments right now that are relevant to me as a user. I've also included some information about average scores over time. which would be where you can see, which locations, which restaurants need the most attention over time. So here we can see my ice cream kiosk is where probably I should be focusing a bit on getting the readiness and so on, getting that up to speed. And then I have added an image carousel here with the latest images from checklists and assignments, which you can then review and take action on if needed. So this was the very quick tour of Mobaro. For those of you who don't know about it, if you are interested in knowing more, feel free to visit our website at mobaro.com or email me at ra@mobaro.com, and then we will get back to you. So that's it for the introduction. Let's get into the main event. But before we actually get started with the 6 topics that I have prepared, you will of course need to know who I'm joined by today. So Kenneth, can you maybe introduce yourself quickly, what your role is in Forup and which kind of checklists that you are using at the moment?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Kenneth Hansen, and I'm a deputy manager in F&B in Forup Sommerland, and I've been here for approximately a year and a half now. And when I came here, Mobaro was new for me. We work with temperature control and checklists for opening and closing. Then we also got Mobaro in our right side, but that's not my area. Yes.
I think you also mentioned you do cleaning checklists as well.
Yeah, a cleaning checklist is also a part of the opening and closing
okay.
checklist. Yeah.
Sure.
And then we use also the task assignments for our maintenance team.
Yeah.
Give them some assignments.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. And Guy?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So my name's Guy Scott-Alf, and I've worked for Pizza Hut restaurants in the UK for over 15 years now. That started off working in restaurants, including being restaurant general manager in quite a few different locations. And then about 7 years ago, I moved to the central operations team, at which point we introduced Mobaro probably 4 years ago, something like that, because we wanted to find a solution that allowed us to do our restaurant audits initially. So we have a big day-long audit that happens once a quarter in our restaurants. There's over 300 questions, and actually at the time, Mobaro was the perfect tool to allow us to do that and report on it centrally. Subsequently, I've moved from ops into IT, but still have a good relationship with Mobaro team and work with our ops team to carry on making sure we're getting the best out of the product. So as well as our audits, we use it for lots of different checklists in the restaurants, and we'll come on to that in the next few slides.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let me return to, yeah, there we go. So let's get into the first topic of today, which is, I think maybe if Kenneth, if you start. So how are you working with increasing service quality and guest experience on F&B, and how do you define opening to a high standard?
With the checklist, the person responsible for the opening and closing checklist, we got a special setup for every restaurant and every store. We got 2 staff, floor staff, which have the responsibility to check every task in the opening and closing checklist.
Okay.
But that also gives them the opportunity to delegate tasks to colleagues. Yeah. It actually buys the management, me and my chief Ole, some more time, and we can always follow live on the dashboard how each store is preparing their openings. As you showed in the dashboard, we can see if they are 100% in goal or only 50% in goal, and then we know where we need to lay our focus. Yeah.
Interesting. And what about you, Guy?
I think in terms of opening to a high standard, what's key for us? Well, I think there's 3 key things here. There's opening safely, so that includes making sure that our food safety checks are done, temperature checks are done, so we're operating in a safe environment. Cleanliness, we want to make sure that all our restaurants are sparkling clean, including all the toilets and everywhere else outside the restaurants. And also readiness, so our prep levels are right for the volume that we're expecting on that day. And actually all of these things are really supported by checklists that can be done through Mobaro.
Interesting. Okay, well, I think, yeah, let's jump on to the next one. That was some really interesting perspectives. So the next topic I prepared is what are the main challenges within food and beverage when it comes to making sure that restaurants and kiosks are ready to open on time and to a high standard. So this is a 2-part question, and so further, how are you managing these challenges? Maybe we should break it down into 2. So maybe Guy, if you start out with this one, so what are the main challenges for you within F&B to ensure that you open on time and to a high standard?
Yeah, I think interestingly, they're the same points that I've just covered. So yeah. Safety, cleanliness, and readiness, and I'll break those down a little bit. So clearly, making sure that all the morning checks are done, food temperature, fridge temperatures, everything else that's critical to ensuring our guests have a safe experience. Checking expiry dates on products, they need to be done in the morning, and they take time. Cleanliness, so the clothes from the night before needs to be checked to ensure that that was done properly, and any jobs that need doing before opening may need picking up on. And then the key thing really is readiness. Being ready for a shift makes the difference between a great guest experience and a poor guest experience. That starts with getting the forecast right where possible, and it can be difficult in some locations, depending on where they are, and depending even on things like the weather. You know, a rainy day versus a sunny day has a big difference on the number of people coming in, and I'm sure that's the same for Kenneth. Usually, you know, we have a standard amount of time to open a restaurant, and we try and keep that as controlled and tight as possible. So when things go wrong, when team members phone in sick or something unexpected happens, I think they're the key challenges to opening on time with all those 3 key points done. I guess how do you manage that as an organization? Ultimately, it's great having these tools in place, because having checklists allows you to make sure that you can go through and all the tasks are done. It also means that if someone who's not used to doing those tasks has to come in and cover for someone, it provides a very easy way of knowing what needs to be done, because you can provide step-by-step information on those tasks. So that certainly helps when you're having to cover an absence. And I think ultimately, the best thing that you can do in making sure that you're ready and open on time is making sure you've got the best possible managers trained in the best possible way, and having a central function that gives those managers agency and the ability to make decisions based on what's happening at any one time in the restaurant. You can train people for most scenarios, but there's always going to be something that'll come up that you can't train people for, and at that point you need really high quality managers to make good decisions for you.
Sure. What about you, Kenneth? Do you have anything to add from a park perspective?
One of our biggest challenges is, of course, as I told before, the consistency. And it's a big challenge for us because we don't get the same staff every day. And then we think the checklist is actually a good tool for us when we have someone call in sick or other things. We got the checklist to secure the same standard in every shop. So in practice, everybody can jump right into the responsibility role and execute in the given setting.
You also mentioned earlier, before we went live here, that also the age of your staff sometimes also comes into, that can be a challenge sometimes.
that's a big challenge. We got the youngest one we got is 16 years old, and that group of persons really need a detailed checklist. So all the questions we can come up with before the seasons is answered in the checklist actually. Of course, there'll always be some other questions, but the main questions actually get answered by the checklist every day. And it's a good way for us to tell the young staff and our seasonal staff what our expectations are and what our standards are, what we do expect of them when they perform the task.
Okay, but that was some interesting points as well. Let me try to move on to the next one, which is so what difference does a great checklist make, and why do you use checklists? I can elaborate on this. So let's, why not just use guidelines or descriptions of processes? Why have checklists that needs to be answered? Maybe Kenneth, can you start on this one?
Yes, of course. It secures our food safety, which in our opinion is critical for running a great business. A great checklist gives a better structure, as I said earlier, overview, and less stress for seasonal staff and for us. And it gives us more time for what is all about outstanding guest experience. That's what we live for. With a great checklist, we don't discuss with our staff what to do, but rather how they solve the task, and then get a very comfortable dialogue in how to find the best way to execute. Also gives us a great checklist gives us the possibility to express our expectations to cleaning, food safety, self-inspection, and so on, which can be a almost impossible job for us to, in such a big place like this, to come around in every shop every day. So it helps us a lot to look at the dashboard and see how good are they coming along with the tasks.
So, but the difference between having just guidelines that you are to follow compared to having checklists that need to be answered.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit that because they are answered, you have dashboards that you can refer back to, and you know that things are getting done. But would you say that your staff, I don't know if, would you say they become better at their jobs by having to put their names behind, I have done this, compared to simply just following a guideline, but you're not really signing off on anything?
Yeah, I think so. When they hold up to the task, and they know we are looking if they are completing the task because they know we are, they also get a little bit competitive in doing it. So they don't come when we close the park, don't come down at closing time and have 80% done instead of 100% done. So they get a little competitive, and also like to hear if we think they have solved the task in the right way. So clearly, I think we get a lot more out of our seasonal staff with a good checklist, because they always know what to do. And it is also kind of guidelines to things.
We can maybe put it over to Guy then, maybe, and see if he has anything to add.
Yeah, sure. I agree with lots of it, actually. And I think that point about accountability is really important, that I'm doing a task on a checklist and my name's attached to it, so I'm signing off it's done. You can do that on a paper record, but it doesn't quite have the same impact of a system that you can see centrally and understand where things aren't being done. But one of the nice features as well in a checklist is the ability to be able to add photos. So it can also be used as a great coaching tool as well. So if we have an example of what a great pizza looks like, and one of our questions in the checklist is to take a photo of one of the pre-prepared items that day, it becomes a very useful tool for area managers to coach team members on, or restaurant managers, or also our menu team centrally, to have a look at the general quality of product throughout the business and understand if there's anything that we can do as a central function to help restaurant teams deliver better quality food. So it works all the way up.
Yeah.
I guess the other point I'd make about checklists generally, I think even people who've been doing the job for a very long time. I was a restaurant manager for 7 or 8 years. I worked in restaurants, and you get to the point where you think you know everything, but humans are always fallible, and it's very easy to miss something because you think you know everything. I'll use an example here because I like it. So I think in 2008, the World Health Organization put together a panel to have a look at checklists in surgery across Europe, particularly, but also in other countries. And they realized that surgery was being done in different ways in different countries with varying outcomes. So this panel put together a checklist that's being used in several European countries now to make sure there was a consistent approach to anesthesia, surgery, and aftercare. And in the 2 years after this checklist was introduced, there's a study done in London hospitals on the impact of introducing this checklist. And it actually had the impact of reducing the number of serious complications from surgery by 1/3, which is massively significant. And I know that's a point about a different industry, but the point carries through to all other businesses that want to use checklists. The fact that having a dedicated checklist there improves performance and improves safety.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then also adding on to your point about being able to add reference photos in checklists, because they're digital, you can also have either direct links to videos. Maybe there's a coffee machine in all of your restaurants or in Forup where there might be some particular details you need to be aware of. You need to do certain things in order to refill it or clean it or whatever it might be. Then you could shoot a video of how you are supposed to do that correctly. And you can leave that directly in the checklist as well, or maybe you have some other kinds of documentation that you want to refer back to, or at least make available to the users while they're performing the checklist. So
absolutely,
yeah. Let's move on to the next one. So we have already covered some of this, but maybe just to sum up. What you get out of collecting the data that you do and how you use it afterwards. I don't know, maybe Guy, if you can start on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. While I was in operations still, this was a real focus of mine, trying to understand what value we could get out of the huge amount of data we were collecting. And I think the reality is there's a lot you can do, particularly in our audit surveys. We have yes/no questions, and I said we have about 300 of them. So using that information and looking at sales and guest feedback and team member turnover, all sorts of different metrics, we started to do some hypothesis testing on saying, this standard in a restaurant, let's have a look at this cohort of restaurants who regularly don't do a standard and this cohort of restaurants that regularly do a standard. What impact does that have on some real key metrics? So what impact does it have on sales? What impact does it have on the guest experience? And this became a very useful way of challenging some of our preconceptions about the value of some of the standards in our business in 2 ways. Firstly, on a purely statistical level, we could have a look to see, was this practice adding any real value? So that was one thing. And there is difficulty in controlling for certain factors in there, but it was a useful guide. And the second point, for those practices that we saw were routinely not being done consistently across the business, so maybe 30–40% of visits saw that practice being done, we challenged the central teams in the business to say, why isn't this being done? Because it's not the fault of the restaurants if so many people are failing to do it. So we go back to the central teams and we say, should the process be clarified? Are the tools available? Do we need to do more training? And that really let us focus on improving the things we're asking our restaurants, well, improving the quality of the things we're asking our restaurants to do, and also cutting out some of the things that add no real value to anyone.
Yeah, interesting. What about you, Kenneth? How are you using
it? I actually think we could be even better to use the data we get from Mobaro. It sounds like a guy are using the data more than we are. We could probably learn a lot from Guy, I think. But of course, we use it for some of the same things, but we also look at it as a good opportunity for us to be even better in every aspect of the business. I think there are many more opportunities in working with Mobaro than we are doing right now. But we needed to be more effective, make more monies, reduced one of the big money spenders is as a wasted work time. We like our staff to be as effective as possible, and we think the checklist will help us with that. So of course we use the data to check on them and see if they do what we expect and what we tell them to with the checklist. And it's important that they do the right things at the right time. That's very important for us. We also use the data for documentation for authorities.
Yeah, of course.
You
said you use it as a coaching tool, so you can, if you spot anything, you can go back and talk to the person, maybe give them some coaching on how to make better decisions or priorities.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about it a little bit before. Coaching the staff, we have a dialogue about all the tasks with them. If we can see that they're not are performing 100%, we have to take action and talk to our, we can call it supervisors in every store and every restaurant to get the, we call it, we need to know why did you not perform 100% yesterday. What was the challenges that made it not possible, and then we get a nice dialogue about it. And if it's because they are missing some tools to reach their goals, we of course will help them and make it even better. We also use a lot of the feedback we get from our staff and of course also the guests to spot the areas in our shops or restaurants that needs improvement.
Let's try and move on with the next one. So on this one, I'm imagining that I was a park that currently only uses guidelines, but I don't have any written down checklists. So my question would be, how do I get started with checklists in the best way? So which types should I be starting with? How detailed should it be? Who should be responsible on my side in my park for getting the process up and running? Are there any do's and don'ts in this entire thing? What do you think, Kenneth?
Yeah, it can actually be a little difficult for me to talk about because I wasn't here when Forbes first started Mobaro, but I have heard a little bit about it. And when we started from scratch, we started with the opening and closing checklist. And later on, you added cleaning and temperature control. The main goal was to make it paperless. And when you started, you actually started to make a standard checklist for every shop and every restaurant, which actually was the same, and then later on you adjusted it and modified it for each shop. So because no shops or restaurants are the same, and not everyone has the same procedures. So the cleaning procedures are pretty standard everywhere in our park. It's very important for us that the cleaning is at the same standard everywhere, and they use the same products for the same things at every place in the park. We think a good checklist, also when you start or when you adjust your checklist after one season or 2 seasons, it's very important that it gets more detailed. It actually is so detailed as possible, because we have such a short season, and our staff is always forgetting when the end of the season they go out and take care of the school or other jobs or you name it, and then they come back next year and then they have forgot everything. We got 450 young staff members who doesn't which have forgotten about all the tasks. So it's very important for us that it's detailed, and the more detailed, the better. And as I told earlier, we must remove all the small questions with help of the checklist. So actually, by looking at the checklist, they get answer to all the typical questions they will have in the startup and during the seasons, of course.
Why do you think it's the best to start with opening, closing, and cleaning? Is that because they add the most value, or are they the easiest ones for the staff to learn, or do you have any?
I think it's good value because the man hours you lay in it, that's not the small. How do I express this in English? I think you get a good gain in preparing them for doing their job as in the best way possible. Then you don't get this wasted work time, as I call it. With our opening and closing procedure and checklist, it's easier for them to have a tool to lay on. And then doesn't mean they can answer questions to the management, because they always can. And we will also follow up in the beginning of the season. And then when we come to our high season, most of the time they are so good in it that it isn't necessary to follow up as much as in the beginning.
Sure.
Yeah, probably could have explained it a little easier, but
who should?
For my bad English.
Yeah, that's okay. Who should be part of the process? Is it only management, or who should be involved in getting it started?
Of course, the management has the main responsibility to make the checklist, because it's me and Ole, which is here year after year. But we also think that it's important to take the seasonal staff in the making process. They have a lot of experience on the floor, and they have some good tips, and they know how things works practically. So in my eyes, it's very important to include the seasonal staff during the making of the checklist, but also when you have started the checklist and are in the season, listen to them and take the good tips they got or advices. Add the things they ask for if you think it's reasonable. We got the experience that if we listen to our young people and take them seriously, we also feel it like they take more responsibility and ownership in the checklist, and that's what we want them to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And then I don't. have written that a checklist is a tool to help you reach the goals, but we don't think it can stand alone. Don't expect things to come by themselves. We need still to educate new staff in the start of every year, and we need always to talk procedures through again, and we have to follow up, and we have to keep the dialogue all the time, also with the checklist. But the checklist helps us a lot, especially opening and closing.
Yeah. Guy, do you have anything that you want to pitch in?
I guess briefly, Kenneth's really covered that brilliantly, and I think we share many of the same ways of doing things there. So I guess where we started was with a huge audit, so over 300 questions, so quite a complicated way of using the tool. But we've used it for all sorts of different reasons. We do it for very short surveys. So if we have a change in marketing material, we can send a picture out showing what something should look like, and then have a couple of questions and ask the restaurant teams to take a photo when they've set it up. That's a very quick way to make sure that you've got that compliance in the way you want the brand to look. I think that's a good example of using it. But other things, I think using assignments, you get a lot of value out of the tool compared to some other tools. So if you have something like a maintenance check, for example, and I'll use an example where once a month our managers might go around and do a fire safety check, and they come to a fire extinguisher that's about to expire. You can automatically generate an assignment that goes to the right person in head office to get that replaced automatically without having to go through a phone call or go through an email chain, and that starts to add real value to the business because it gets rid of a lot of that administrative non-value adding stuff. So I mean, the best way to get started, I'm not sure if there is one best way, but I think the tool is so flexible that you can do lots of different things with it.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting how you guys are using or are going that much into auditing. I don't know if you're a very large company, so I don't know if necessarily in a theme park you would go into that much detail, but I think it's the concept of auditing is very interesting, and maybe something that might be interesting for parks to get into, to also heighten the guest experience, to go out sometimes and do audits of restaurants, to see, just put yourself in the guest shoes and see what's going on, and then collecting that data and try to process it and do a better job year on year.
Yeah, I think that's right. And because we're part of a big multinational, so we're the UK franchise of a big American company, there's a component of that audit that's sort of mandated by the franchisor. So we have to feed certain information back to them that we're maintaining certain standards that are global standards. And actually having this tool allows us to do that in a much more streamlined way because the data can be sent very easily across to them.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into the final topic, which goes quite well with the current world situation. I know this has had a huge effect on everyone, and we are running a bit short on time, so we can't cover absolutely everything here, but just the main points. How has COVID-19 affected the way you open, run, and close your F&B units? Maybe Guy, if you start on this one.
Sure, yeah. So I'll start on a general business point and just a brief summary of that, and then just talk a little bit about how we've used Mobaro. So for our business, there's been a massive change in the layout of our restaurants and lots of operational things. So we stopped taking cash entirely. So all of our restaurants now only take electronic payments, and we moved from ordering with a waiter or ordering at a counter in some of our restaurants to mobile ordering, and now over 85% of our guests are using mobile ordering to place their orders. So it's a massive operational change, and we did that partially because of COVID, because it meant that social distancing was a lot easier, but it had also been part of our sort of medium-term strategic plan to try and move towards more mobile ordering, because we felt it added some real value to the guest in terms of giving them control over ordering and paying, which had been a long time frustration. I think going on to where we've used Mobaro, we've used it extensively actually, and I'm really proud of how quickly we've managed to open our restaurants compared to most of the people in the UK market. So we have 240 restaurants altogether, and within a period of about 6 to 8 weeks, we'd opened 230 of them. And actually having Mobaro really allowed us to do this safely, because there are lots of challenges and lots of changes that needed to be made, and lots of teams who were coming back off furlough, because for a large amount of time several restaurants were closed down entirely and the staff were away from the business on the government furlough scheme. So bringing them back with a very clear checklist of what they needed to do to make sure everything was ready to open safely was absolutely brilliant. And again, we used assignments there to make sure that if anything was missing, so if hand sanitizer station hadn't been sent out or the new paper disposable menus hadn't been sent out, the team centrally very quickly knew there was an issue and could get that action so that we could open with this very tight schedule. And it's been extremely successful.
That's good to hear. What about you, Kenneth? Have you done anything in terms of checklists or procedure changes, or what's?
Yeah, of course we have. It has also affected our park a lot. I don't think we have used Mobaro as much as Guy. We talked about it yesterday with Guy, that actually he envy that they have used Mobaro in that kind of way. That's very nice. Like Guy and Pizza Hut, we also would have liked to make the park cashless, but because of the Danish law, we can't make the park entirely cashless. We have told our guests that the best way to pay is with the card, but we also still get a lot of cash in. When it comes to the checklist, we could probably have used it even more than we have, but we have modified our already existing checklist with, for example, 4 times a day we disinfect all surfaces in every shop, every contact surfaces with from cash register to Dancourt terminals, you name it. We have put around 300 new dispensers up in the park for disinfection. On the guest side, actually, it's not new for us to work with the disinfection in the kitchens and the shops, but it clearly makes a whole new routine for our staff and new procedures on how to check these dispensers. And I think that actually we could have used Mobaro in a more effective way, coming to check dispensers up with a frequency, put a frequency on every dispenser, get some notes on them to see how often they needed to be refilled or something like that. We will definitely take that with us to the next season and use Mobaro even more in that process. Otherwise, we in the cleaning of the stores and preparing the stores for opening, we don't think we have changed a lot, because we already think we got a very good and effective way to clean our shops. So we have actually just talked a lot more about it with our staff. So of course we have done a little more in the disinfection, but cleaning the stores is the same as always, spotless. The only difference is just that we have talked even more about it with our staff, so they are aware of COVID-19 and the problems, the challenges that it brings with it.
Yeah. And then also, as you say, modify your existing checklists where needed.
Yeah, exactly. We could also have used the checklist perhaps with some pictures of how the seating in the restaurants could have looked like, because we have also removed a lot of seatings in our restaurants because of the distance between the guests. It has to be 1 meter or 2 meters at one point. So I think there's some good learnings from COVID-19 and the way to work also with Mobaro in that way.
Yeah, that's good. So summing up, I think at least
May I interrupt you quickly?
Yes, of course.
We actually do have a few questions. If we have just, I'm not sure if we can speed through them in just a few minutes, but sure. Should we take the time to do it?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, so this is Christian speaking from somewhere back in the studio here. I'm not sure we can cover this question briefly, but yeah, it's a question on, I think, firstly, are you using Mobaro for your food and safety checks? And I think the ones that are actually being verified by the Food and Safety Authority, the Veterinarian Food Safety Authority, I believe it's called here in Denmark. Is that the way that you're using it? And is the quality of the data that you're handing over to them from Mobaro, is that approved by them?
Yes, we use only Mobaro for the authorities, and they are very satisfied with the way it works. It's easy to look up things and go back in history. We have reduced the time with the authorities, and they have also reduced the time with us when they are here.
Everybody wins.
Yeah, it's everybody wins, and it's a very great tool in history of every shop. Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that, Guy? I know the rules are a bit different in yours, on your side of the pond.
Yeah, sure. I think most of Europe have sort of similar rules on this. There are some challenges in the UK because the local health authorities are in different councils, so there's hundreds of different ones across the UK. But I think in general, although currently we're still using a different system for it, it is something we've been looking at. Well, we were looking at before COVID, and we will look at again, is how we move everything into Mobaro, because we really like the tool. So I think in the UK, it's absolutely feasible to do this. So you've got the ability to put temperature ratings, and you can do all your HACCP checks in there. I think for us, it just for us to have a conversation with our primary authority, which is the health authority that we work with all our documentation, and I think they'd be really satisfied with using that tool, because as Kenneth says, it means that information is a lot more visible. There's no risk of records going missing, and you have better control when things aren't completed, rather than waiting until you go and have a look at a paper checklist in a restaurant that might be once a quarter or so.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I can add a little thing, if for example we got an assignment for our maintenance team, which can affect the food safety, and let's say we got a problem today, and we make the assignment in Mobaro, and the same day the authorities come and visit us, we can actually show her that we have made an assignment for our maintenance team, and she can see that we are working with this challenge, and that satisfies her or him a lot, that we got this assignment process in Mobaro.
And I think what that also means is having that visibility of temperature means you can do preventative maintenance on fridges and freezers. So if you notice a pattern where a fridge that should be at 3 or 4 degrees is running at 5, 6, 7 degrees constantly, it gives you an early indication that there might be a problem with that piece of machinery, and you can go out and service it. That clearly is a lot more cost effective than waiting until it breaks and having to throw out a load of stock that's defrosted.
Yeah. Agree.
Cool. I think that was a sufficient answer to that question, or at least I hope so. Let me see. I believe we have one more here. That's a specific question for you, Guy. A question about whether your team is doing random checks as well as scheduled checks throughout the operational day. So I think it's a question about a few curious details about how are you actually employing Mobaro in an operational day. Is it random checks or is it scheduled checks, and is it being done by area managers, or are they also being done, or is Mobaro also being used by the individual hut?
Okay, so yeah, I can answer that. The answer is there's a range of different uses for it. So if I start at our sort of big quarterly audit, that is random. So the auditors will come in, they go in at least once a quarter into the restaurant, but there's no indication of when that will be. So that is a surprise audit and allows us to get a real picture of what's going on in the restaurant. We of course have standard checklists that happen either in the morning or in the evening or on a Monday or whenever that would be, and they're scheduled in. We don't currently have any checklists that are done specifically throughout the day, but you have the ability to schedule those in if you want a checklist. And correct me if I'm wrong, because we don't use it, but you can schedule a check to be done at 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock if you want that, and that can all be done within the tool. We don't do that currently. And in terms of users, yes, we have checklists for our general managers, checklists for area managers, and checklists from people for people visiting from head office, depending on the need. So lots of different use cases.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much. And then I think we'll make this the last question, since we are already past time, but questions are just pouring in. A good question here is when we tend to go into too much detail for opening checklists, we experience the opening of a kiosk taking too much time. How do you make sure an efficient opening but a detailed checklist gets balanced? Would you like to just give a quick note on that, Guy, and then I'll take you, Kenneth, afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, can it take too much time if you give a detailed checklist? I'd say that's possibly because people are skipping things when you don't have a checklist. So people are cutting corners. So it can potentially seem that things are taking longer when you have that process in place, but it's probably because people are doing things properly rather than cutting all those corners and doing things the way they think it should be done. But that's certainly my experience of having worked in a lot of different restaurants over the years. I think there is a point that you need to make the checklists as clear and concise as possible so that they can be easily followed, and you can use some of the features of providing links to standards if you need to provide clarity on any of the things you're asking. And again, you could argue that that would initially make things take a little longer when people are checking how to do things properly. Based on the timestamp of when questions are being completed, we can see what a normal amount of time to complete a checklist is, and if there are a group of restaurants who are taking significantly longer to do checks than another, we can do two things. We can try and understand why that's happening and provide coaching, but then at the other side, those restaurants that are doing things quickly but still getting good results, we can learn the best practices from those and share those with the rest of the organization. So that data richness again gives you the ability to really improve your operations.
Cool. Let's call it that for the Q&A session. I'll be quiet now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as it says on the screen, that's it, folks. Thank you very much to Kenneth and Guy for pitching in.
No problem.